You're lying in bed. The lights are off. The world is quiet. But your mind, it's wide awake. Something doesn't feel right tonight. Not wrong, just off. Like the edges of reality aren't lining up quite like they used to. You remember that dream you had once. The one where everything felt real until you woke up. The people, the pain, the love. Gone in an instant. So now you wonder, what if this is the dream? What if everything you believe, your memories, your body, your name, it's just a story your mind is telling itself? What if logic can't save you? What if time is an illusion? What if free will was never yours to begin with? Tonight, we're going to follow the cracks, through impossible questions, through truths that undo themselves, through paradoxes so strange they just might be realer than reality. So close your eyes. Let go of certainty and prepare to fall asleep to a world that may not be real at all. The mirror that remembers. The paradox of identity over time. You're standing in front of the mirror again. Same cracked tiles. Same yellow light humming above. Same you, or so it seems. But something's off tonight. You're not sure if it's the weight behind your eyes, the way your shoulders don't sit the same, or how that tiny scar on your cheek feels like it belongs to someone else. You stare harder. That face, was it always like this? You know it's your face. You recognize the asymmetry of the jaw, the faint shadow of your dimple when your lips twitch into a half-smile. And yet, there's something unplaceable, like you're impersonating yourself, like this reflection knows secrets you don't. You remember being 10. You played in the dirt, built empires out of plastic bricks, and thought dinosaurs might still be hiding underground. You remember 17. You were angrier then, more certain, less afraid. And what about 24 when you told someone you loved them and really believed it would last forever? Each version of you felt real at the time. But where did they go? Because that 10-year-old doesn't live here anymore. That 17-year-old wouldn't even recognize you. That 24-year-old, their favorite song, makes you cringe now. Their dreams feel like borrowed clothes you've long since outgrown. And yet, if someone showed you a photo of that child, a teen, that former self, you'd say, "That's me." So here's the paradox. How can you be the same person if everything about you has changed? Philosophers call this the paradox of identity over time, and its most famous metaphor is the Ship of Theseus. Imagine a ship, ancient, proud, beautiful. Over decades, its wooden planks rot and are replaced. First the sails, then the rudder. Eventually, every single part is swapped. Now, is it still the same ship? And what if someone took all the original planks and rebuilt the exact same vessel elsewhere? Which one is the real Ship of Theseus? More importantly, which one is really you? You shed skin cells. You've rewritten your beliefs. You've watched old memories fade, reappear, shift. Science tells us that nearly every cell in your body has turned over since childhood. Your brain. Rewired by heartbreak, hope, trauma, time. Every neuron that fired back then has danced to different rhythms now. So when someone calls your name, when you sign a legal document, when your mother says, "I miss the old you," what are they referring to? A name, a voice, a cluster of memories stitched together by habit, or just the idea of continuity. Let's take it further. Suppose someone copied your exact memories, personality traits, and thought patterns into a robot, an android with your same voice, same laugh, same stories. It thinks it's you. It remembers your childhood dog. And this is someone it never met because you did. Who's the real you? The you who bleeds, or the one who remembers? The one in the mirror, or the one inside the mirror? Here's where things get uncomfortable. You've apologized for things the old you did. You've walked away from friendships that no longer felt like home. You've cried for versions of yourself that never got to heal. Maybe you even said, I don't recognize who I've become. But what if that's the point? What if you were never meant to stay the same? Maybe you're not a statue to be preserved, but a flame to be carried. Maybe identity isn't a fixed object, it's a river. Always moving, always shifting. Still the river, just never the same water. And yet there's something that ties it all together. Because when someone calls your name across a room, you turn. When a psalm from your past plays, your chest tightens. When a stranger says, you remind me of someone, you smile. Maybe you're not the same person you were, but maybe you're the only one who remembers how it felt to be them. And that memory, however imperfect, is the thread. So the next time you stare into the mirror and wonder if the person looking back is real to you, ask yourself this. Is it possible to be a story and still be real? And if the story keeps changing, maybe that just means you're still alive. The brain in a vat, what if everything you see is a simulation? You sit at your desk. Your coffee steams gently. The cup is warm in your hand. You would feel the ceramic pressing into your palm, the heat sinking slowly into your skin. Outside, the world moves along. The dog barks in the distance. A car passes. Your phone buzzes with another alert. Everything feels familiar, ordinary, solid. And then for just a moment, something feels wrong. It's barely noticeable. The way the light hits the wall, maybe. Or how your screen lags for half a second when you swipe. A flicker in the corner of your eye. You brush it off. But the thought lingers, subtle, unsettling. What if none of this is real? What if this coffee, this room, this entire life is nothing but a simulation? You're not sitting at a desk. You're not wearing clothes. You're not even human anymore, not in the way you thought. You're a brain, suspended in a glass vat, floating in a bath of clear liquid. Wires are connected to the base of your skull, but you still have one. A machine hums quietly nearby, feeding your mind every sight, sound, smell, and memory you've ever known. It tells your brain what it's like to sip coffee, what it feels like to fall in love, what sorrow tastes like, what fear does to your breath. It tells you what your face looks like, even though you've never truly seen it. You've never opened your eyes. You've never touched anything. You've never spoken a word. You've just been here, in this vat, thinking, experiencing a world that doesn't exist. And the worst part, you can't prove this isn't true. This is the thought experiment philosophers call the brain in a vat. It's the modern version of Descartes' old nightmare when he asked, hundreds of years ago, what if a malicious demon is tricking me? Making me believe I have a body, a life, a world. Descartes couldn't be sure of anything, not even his own senses. But there was one thing he clung to. If he was doubting, then he must exist. I think, therefore I am. But even that, this thinking, could be part of the simulation. Because if a machine is advanced enough to trick your senses, it can also trick your thoughts. It can feed you memories of a childhood you never had. It can inject dreams of first kisses, forgotten birthdays, and ocean sunsets, and every single bit of it can feel real. You think you remember falling off your bike when you were 6, scraping your knee, crying in your mother's arms. But how do you know that happened? Not just that you remember it, but that it actually occurred in a physical world. You think the memory proves it, but the memory could be false, implanted, constructed. You might have been activated 5 minutes ago. So what is real? And does it even matter? Philosopher Nick Bostrom took this idea even further. He asked if it's possible to create realistic simulations, and we ever gain the technology to do it. Why wouldn't future civilizations simulate the past? They'd simulate their ancestors, whole worlds, entire timelines, and they wouldn't just do it once. They'd do it millions of times. That means, statistically, the odds that you're living in the original physical reality, the so-called base reality, are incredibly small. It's far more likely you're inside one of the simulations. One of many. A copy of a copy. Maybe this is why you sometimes feel disconnected from your life. Why everything feels like it's running on a script you didn't write. Why you sometimes hear your name in a crowd and feel like an actor hitting your mark. Maybe it's because you are. Maybe someone programmed this scene. Maybe this moment, this very thought was written long before you had it. And yet you feel. You still feel. You still remember what it was like to sit in silence after a loss. You still remember your first crush. The first time someone broke your heart. The way laughter bubbled out of you when you least expected it. These emotions aren't illusions to you. They're the most real thing you've ever known. So even if they're just electric pulses in a wire, they still matter. Maybe you're not the one creating your reality. Maybe you're just reacting to a script. But when the pain hits you, or the joy moves you, when something in your chest stirs at the sound of a certain song, does it make a difference whether the world is simulated? Even if none of this is real, it still feels real. The pain still burns. The love still aches. The doubt still gnaws. And that's the true horror of the brain in a vat. Not that you might be trapped in a fake world, but that you might be trapped in a real feeling inside a fake one. A prisoner of sensation. Awake in a dream you didn't ask for and can't wake from. Or maybe you're the only real thing here. Maybe everyone else, the cashier at the store, the stranger on the train, the person who broke your heart, they're all part of the illusion. Maybe you were placed here to see what you would do, how long you'd last, how deep your thoughts would go before the program collapsed. Or maybe this is a test. Maybe you're being watched. Or maybe the watchers are gone and this world is just running on autopilot, an abandoned simulation still churning up moments like a record player stuck in a groove. And now you're wondering, if this is all fake, then what is truth? What is freedom? Is there any way out? The answer is no one knows. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the brain in the vat will never find the truth. Maybe the truth isn't out there. Maybe it's the question itself that matters. The act of doubting, of asking. Because even if you're just a brain, just an echo in an empty tank, you're still dreaming. And maybe that dream is what makes you real. Zeno's paradox. Why can't you reach the end? You start to run. The goal is just ahead. A tree at the edge of the path, golden leaves dancing in the wind, sunlight splitting through the branches like a promise. You tell yourself it's only 100 feet away. You'll reach it in seconds. You take a step, then another, and another. But no matter how far you run, the tree always seems slightly out of reach. You measure the distance. You're halfway there. You run again, this time closing half of that remaining space. Then again, half of that. And again, half of that. And still, you haven't arrived. Each time you move forward, there's still some distance left to close. It's shrinking, yes, but it never disappears. No matter how small the gap gets, it never vanishes completely. You can't seem to touch the tree. Can't quite get there. You're caught in an endless rhythm of almost. This is the feeling of chasing something you desperately want. A dream. A person. An answer. The life you thought you'd have by now. It always feels close, just a few more changes. A few more steps. You can see it. You can nearly taste it. But every time you reach out, it pulls just slightly farther away. Zeno's paradox traps you in this loop. The paradox goes like this. Before you can reach your destination, you must first get halfway there. Before you can complete that half, you must get halfway through that. And again, and again. An infinite number of steps, which means, by the logic of this idea, you can never actually arrive. You will always be approaching. Always almost. If space is infinitely divisible, then so is time. And if every moment can be split into smaller and smaller parts, then motion itself becomes impossible, or at least illusory. The ancient Greek philosopher Zeno designed this thought experiment to challenge what we take for granted. Motion, progress, change. On paper, it makes no sense that you could ever reach your goal. How can you complete an infinite number of steps in a finite time? And yet, here you are, still moving. Or are you? Because sometimes in life it feels exactly like this. Like you're making effort after effort, but never actually arriving. You work harder. You try again. You improve yourself. You heal. You reach what you thought was the finish line, only to discover it was just another halfway point. You're always chasing. Maybe it's a better version of yourself, more successful, more stable, more whole, or maybe it's closure. That moment when you stop thinking about them. When your chest doesn't tighten at the thought of what was lost. But it never quite comes. There's always one more step. You thought healing would feel like an end point, like peace, but instead it feels like progress broken into fractions. You get halfway to forgetting, then halfway to forgiving, then halfway to letting go, and still something lingers. The paradox whispers, you will never reach the end. And maybe that's what hurts the most, that we believe we're supposed to. That life should have neat conclusions, that every story should resolve, that we should eventually stop running. But what if we're not meant to stop? What if the illusion isn't motion, but the idea of arrival? Maybe the finish line was never the point. Maybe it was always about the motion, the act of moving forward despite the infinite space ahead. Mathematicians eventually resolved Zeno's paradox using calculus. They proved that an infinite number of shrinking distances can still add up to a finite total. In the real world, you can reach the tree. You can arrive. But in the emotional world, the world inside your chest, Zeno still wins. Because when you finally reach the tree, you realize it wasn't the end. It was just another beginning. Another goal appears beyond it. Another version of happiness just slightly out of reach. And so you keep running. Maybe not because you believe you'll arrive, but because running is what makes you feel alive. Because motion, despite everything, is still the most honest thing you have. Because the act of trying, of chasing, of hoping, that's where your soul lives. And so you run, not to reach the end, but to prove that you're still moving, still here, still trying. The dream argument. What if you're dreaming right now? You wake up in a quiet room. The sheets are twisted around your legs. The light through the curtains is soft, golden, unreal. You blink, and for a moment, you're not sure where you are. Then your brain catches up. Your bedroom, morning. You stretch, yawn, run your hand through your hair, but something doesn't feel right. You remember what you were dreaming, sort of. A hallway that bent in impossible directions. Someone you haven't seen in years. A sound you've never heard in waking life. In the dream, it all made perfect sense. Nothing was strange until you woke up. And now, as you sit on the edge of the bed, rubbing your eyes and grounding yourself in the familiar weight of your own body, another thought creeps in, slow and quiet like fog. What if you're still dreaming? Not in the half-asleep sense, not metaphorically, but truly. What if this moment, right now, these sheets, this room, this identity you've stitched together, what if all of it is part of a dream so seamless you can't tell it apart from waking life? This is the dream argument, the paradox proposed by philosophers as old as Plato and sharpened centuries later by Descartes. It's simple, but haunting. Since dreams can feel just as real as waking life, how can we ever be sure we're not dreaming right now? Think about it. You've had dreams where you were certain, absolutely certain, that what you were experiencing was real. The people, the sounds, the textures, the rules of gravity and logic, all of it felt genuine. You've loved in dreams. You've grieved, you've panicked, you've tasted food, felt pain, cried tears. Your body believed it. Your mind believed it. You swore it was true. Until it wasn't. Until you woke up and realized none of it happened. So how can you trust that this isn't just another layer? Maybe you're dreaming of being awake. Maybe the idea of waking up later is just another part of the dream. Maybe you're not a person in a bed at all. Maybe that body you feel is just an illusion your mind is feeding you. Maybe you're asleep in some other version of yourself. Or maybe you've always been asleep. In lucid dreams, you can become aware of the dream. You can manipulate it. You can fly. You can breathe underwater. And still, despite how surreal it becomes, you can feel convinced that it's all perfectly natural. What if you never reach lucidity in this one? What if this world, this version of life, is just vivid enough to keep you convinced? You go to work. You eat. You argue. You laugh. You pay bills. You make plans. But what if all of that is part of the construct? What if the people in your life are dream characters? What if your childhood was just a storyline you were dropped into mid-narrative? You may be thinking, but this can't be a dream. Look how consistent it all is. And yet, don't your dreams borrow the rules of waking life? Don't they imitate reality just enough to fool you? The brain is powerful. It fills in blanks. It writes stories. It suspends disbelief when it has to. Now ask yourself, what would be different if this were a dream? Would the rules of physics be bent? Not necessarily. You dreamed of obeying gravity, of reading books, of waiting in line at the DMV. You've dreamed of completely mundane things, work meetings, grocery stores, long drives, without ever realizing something was wrong. Because your brain wants the story to feel believable. It edits for realism. So maybe the glitch isn't in the details. Maybe it's in the doubt itself. The fact that you're asking this question right now might be the crack in the illusion. Or maybe it's a failsafe. A little narrative twist your dreaming brain added for flavor. In some dreams, you realize what's happening and try to wake up. You scream. You fall. You jump from windows. And sometimes you do wake up. But other times you just fall into a different dream. You think you've awakened, only to find the rules have shifted again. So how many layers are you down? How many times have you woken up into another illusion? And if this is all a dream, who is the dreamer? Is it you that you think you are? Or something else entirely? Maybe this life is the longest dream you've ever had. Maybe you've only been asleep for a few minutes, but the dream stretches decades. Maybe you'll wake up soon, back in a world where you're someone else, somewhere else, with no memory of this one. Or maybe this is the dream you chose to have, a simulated lifetime, a chance to feel, to try, to break and rebuild. A full, messy story with heartbreak, boredom, triumph, and pain, wrapped in the illusion of time and identity. A dream so immersive you agreed to forget it was a dream. And maybe, just maybe, you're beginning to remember. But the truth is, you can't prove this isn't real. Just like you can't prove the next time you wake up you'll be any closer to truth. All you can do is keep dreaming. Or keep living. If there's even a difference. The sword's paradox. When does a heap become a heap? There's a single grain of sand on the floor. Just one. No one would call it a heap. You add another. Still not a heap. Then another. And another. 10 grains. 20. 50. 100. At what point, what exact moment, did those scattered grains become a heap? Was it the 37th grain? The 82nd? The 143rd? Or was it never about the number at all? That's the paradox. The sword's paradox, also called the paradox of the heap, asks a seemingly ridiculous question. If one grain of sand isn't a heap and adding a single grain can't magically create one, Then how do we ever end up with a heap? It's not about sand. Not really. It's about boundaries, blurry lines, gradual change, the kind that slips past unnoticed until suddenly everything is different. And now, you're the one being counted. When did you become who you are now? Was it the first heartbreak? The third? That summer you cut your hair and swore you'd never look back? Or the night you couldn't sleep because you didn't recognize your own thoughts? You didn't wake up one day and say, "Now I'm changed." It happened slowly, quietly, like adding grains of sand to a pile, one at a time over years. You were just living, adjusting, shifting slightly each time something hurt you or healed you or rewired your hope. Then one day someone says, "You're not the same person anymore." And you pause, because they're right. You aren't. But when did it happen? When did you go from almost to there? From coping to different? From someone who's trying to someone who's changed? We don't just wrestle with this in our personal lives. Society lives in this paradox too. When does a person become rich? How many dollars is enough? When is someone old? At 60, 70, 90? When do you call someone famous? When 5 people recognize them? 50? A million? We love categories, labels, definitions. But life is messier than that. It doesn't care about your lines in the sand. You don't notice the weight building until one morning you can't get out of bed. You don't realize you've fallen in love until their absence aches. You don't realize you've healed until you no longer flinch at the memory. The paradox plays out in every corner of your life. One missed call isn't neglect. One white lie isn't betrayal. One skipped workout doesn't mean you're giving up. But when do those tiny things become something bigger? And can you ever pinpoint the moment when almost nothing becomes something you can't ignore? Sometimes change sneaks in like a thief. One habit at a time. One quiet compromise. One boundary blurred. Until suddenly you're sitting in the middle of a life that doesn't feel like yours, wondering how you got there. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes growth builds the same way. Slow, steady, invisible. You keep going. You show up. You try again. It doesn't feel like progress. Not really. Until one day someone says you've changed, and you believe them. So maybe the truth of the Surrett's paradox isn't that there's no such thing as a heap, but that we're terrible at noticing becoming. We want change to come with a trumpet, a final exam, a breakup text, a signed contract. But more often than not, it comes in grains. Grains of routine, grains of neglect, grains of effort, grains of love. They gather slowly, and then all at once. So when does a heap become a heap? Maybe when you stop counting. Maybe when you stop asking. Maybe when you look down and realize you've been standing on a mountain that built itself beneath your feet. The paradox of the stone: can God create a rock so heavy he can't lift it? You close your eyes and imagine what power feels like. Absolute, boundless, divine power. The ability to shape stars, to bend time, to will a mountain into existence with a single thought. You imagine what it would feel like to have no limits. Now, here's the question that shatters it all. Can such a being, an all-powerful God, create a rock so heavy that even he cannot lift it? If he can't, then there's something he can't do. He can't lift the rock. If he can, then there's something he still can't do. Create something beyond his control. Either way, he's no longer all-powerful. And that's the paradox. The moment omnipotence tries to test itself, it collapses into contradiction. The moment a limitless force meets an unmovable object, something has to give. And in this case, it might be the very idea of perfection itself. You start to feel the edges blur, because this isn't just about gods and rocks. It's about you, your own idea of strength, control, expectations, What does it mean to be powerful? To be in charge of your own life? You tell yourself you should be able to handle anything. Lift any weight. Carry any burden. Smile through any storm. But then something hits you, grief, failure, uncertainty, and you crumble. You created a rock you can't lift. And you wonder, does that make you weak or just real? We're taught to admire perfection, to chase invincibility. Be the best, be unbreakable. But what if perfection is its own trap? What if being all-powerful means being unable to bend, to fail, to feel small? What if even God, if such a being exists, can't escape the paradox of himself? The ancient philosophers who wrestled with this paradox weren't mocking belief. They were asking something deeper. Is there a point where power stops being meaningful? If you're so strong that you can't ever lose, do your victories matter? If you can never suffer, can you truly love? If you can never be hurt, can you be brave? And if you can't create limits, are you really free? Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is accept weakness. To say, I can't carry this anymore. To put the rock down. Because in real life, the rocks we create are never literal. They're expectations. They're roles we were taught to play. They're grief we never finished feeling. They're the pressure to be perfect, to never crack, never cry, never pause. We build them ourselves. We think we can handle it all, and then one day we can't. And in that moment, we feel like we've failed. But maybe the failure isn't in dropping the rock. Maybe it's in believing you had to lift it alone. So ask yourself again, what is true power? Is it the ability to do anything? Or is it the courage to admit when something is too much? The paradox of the stone isn't meant to humiliate gods. It's meant to humble the idea of power itself. Because maybe omnipotence isn't about domination. Maybe it's about choice. The choice to create beauty, even when it might break your heart. The choice to be gentle when you could be cruel. The choice to stop carrying what's crushing you, and just be. So can God create a rock so heavy you can't lift it? Maybe he already did. Maybe that rock is you. All your flaws, all your sorrow, all your questions. And maybe the miracle isn't that he can lift you, but that he chooses to sit beside you, right there on the ground while you figure it out. The Ship of Theseus, but makes you you if every piece is changed. You're walking through a museum. It's quiet. Marble floors echo with soft footsteps. You stop in front of an ancient wooden ship encased in glass. The plaque says it once sailed across the Mediterranean. But every plank, every rope, every nail has been replaced over the centuries. Bit by bit, rotting wood swapped for stronger timber. Frayed sails rewoven. A new rudder. A fresh coat of paint. Not a single original piece remains. And yet they still call it the Ship of Theseus. So do you stare at it and wonder, is it still the same ship? Or is it just pretending? Now look at yourself. You're not who you were 5 years ago. Not really. Your body has turned over nearly every cell. Your skin is new. Your bones have reshaped slightly. Your memories are faded, distorted, some entirely false. Your beliefs have shifted. Your voice sounds different. You no longer laugh at the same jokes. You don't trust the same people. You don't even dream the same way. Piece by piece, you've been rebuilt. So who are you now? If someone found an old journal of yours, they might not recognize you in it. The handwriting is yours. The feelings are familiar. But the person, a stranger, someone who loved differently, worried about things that no longer matter, made promises they never kept. Is that still you? Or just someone you used to be? And if it's not you, when did the switch happen? When did the continuity break? What if someone took every piece of the old you, every memory, every cell, every feeling, and built a perfect replica? Would that clone be you? Would it be more you than the current version standing here now, rewritten by time and heartbreak and survival? Which one is the real you, the version made of your past, or the one still changing in the present? The Ship of Theseus asks this in the most haunting way. Identity isn't a fixed object. It's a process, a rebuild, a renovation you don't notice while it's happening. You go through something hard, and afterward you say, that changed me. But what if everything has been changing you all along? We tend to think of ourselves as stable, continuous, a single, unbroken line. But what if we're really just ships, held together by memory and motion, sailing forward while leaving behind everything we once were? Maybe the illusion of self is comforting. The idea that we are one person, solid and dependable, makes it easier to love, to commit, to remember. But the truth is, we are always replacing pieces, with every choice, every failure, every small joy. We swap out who we were for who we need to be. Sometimes you meet someone who says, "You've changed," and maybe you have. Maybe they're looking for planks that have long since been replaced. Maybe they're talking to a version of you that no longer exists. But here's the beautiful twist. The ship keeps sailing anyway. Because maybe identity isn't about holding onto every old part. Maybe it's about choosing which parts you carry forward. Maybe it's not about being the same, but about being you, whatever that means today. So is the Ship of Theseus still the same ship? And are you still the same person who fell in love that winter? Who made that mistake? Who cried on the kitchen floor 3 apartments ago? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe it doesn't matter. Because what matters is that you're still sailing, still moving, still holding yourself together with new parts and old hope, still becoming. And maybe that's more real than anything that ever stayed the same. The twin paradox. Time moves slower when you travel fast. You and your twin used to do everything together. Same laugh, same birthday, same childhood secrets whispered in the dark. You always thought you'd grow old side by side. 2 mirrors aging in sync. But now you're standing at the spaceport, staring at the shuttle that carried them away years ago. They went on a mission, deep space near light speed. You stayed here, grounded, you lived your life. Got older, watched the world change. And now they're back. They step off the ship smiling, looking almost exactly the same. Maybe a little more tired, maybe a little more distant, but not older. Not like you. You've aged decades. They've only aged a few years. You hug them, and it feels like touching the ghost of the past. Someone who skipped ahead in the story while you read every word. And that's the paradox. In Einstein's theory of relativity, time doesn't flow the same for everyone. The faster you move through space, especially at speeds approaching the speed of light, the slower time passes for you, relative to those standing still. To you, time has been steady. Your twin, time barely ticked. This isn't science fiction. It's physics, proven by atomic clocks on jets. Measurable, real. The laws of the universe bend under motion. Time is not absolute. It's relative. It's flexible. And it means 2 people who started in the same place can live completely different timelines just by moving differently through the universe. So what is time, then? You thought it was a constant, a river flowing in one direction. But now it feels more like a web, a patchwork, a trick of speed and perspective. And this isn't just about astronauts, because you've felt it too. Have you ever looked back at a friend you drifted away from? Realized that while your days felt long, theirs were racing by. Or noticed how some memories feel like yesterday, while others feel 100 years away, even if they happened last month. We all live in our own time frames. Some people move fast, chasing goals and cities and lovers like comets. Others stay still, counting seasons and slow cycles of repetition and routine. And sometimes, when you meet again, you go longer in sync. Time did something strange while you were apart, just like you and your twin. Maybe you're the one who stayed home, watched your parents grow frail, built a life, let people in and out. Or maybe you're the traveler out chasing stars, chasing escape, chasing something faster than memory. Either way, you're not the same anymore. And neither is time. Because the twin paradox isn't just physics, it's emotional. It's what happens when two people start from the same point and end up in different worlds. And the strangest part, both twins are right. From your perspective, decades passed. From theirs, barely any time at all. No one is wrong. Time didn't betray you. It just stretched, shifted, curled around movement like fabric in the wind. So maybe time isn't a ruler you measure life with. Maybe it's something softer, stranger, more personal. Maybe it lives in the space between choices, in the speed of your emotions, in how much you carry and how far you run to avoid it. You and your twin may never sync up again, but that's okay, because maybe time is less about matching clocks and more about honoring what you did with the moments you were given, however fast or slow they moved. And maybe the real paradox isn't that time bends, it's that we expect it not to. The grandfather paradox, and you kill the past that made you. You're holding the gun. Your hands are shaking. The air smells like rain and old dust. You're standing in a small wooden cabin in 1943, and the man sitting by the fire doesn't know who you are. He looks up at you confused, calm, a little amused. You know this face from faded photographs, from stories your mother used to tell. He's younger now, stronger. He hasn't yet met your grandmother. He hasn't yet fathered your father. He hasn't yet set in motion the fragile line that ends with you. And yet here you are, gun aimed at the very man who made your existence possible. If you pull the trigger, what happens? Do you vanish the second the bullet lands? Does the world glitch? Does your memory flicker out like a dying candle? Because if your grandfather dies before your parent is born, then your parent never exists, and neither do you. And if you never exist, then who pulled the trigger? That's the paradox. The grandfather paradox is time travel's cruelest riddle. If you go back in time and change the past in a way that erases your future, then you could never have gone back in the first place. You can't destroy the road you traveled without destroying the traveler. But if you didn't go back, then the past was never changed. Your grandfather lived. You were born. And you could go back again. It loops. It eats itself. And it begs the question, can the past ever truly be touched? Now pull back from the sci-fi. Set the gun down. Step out of the cabin. This paradox isn't just about murder or machines. It's about regret. About trying to rewrite the parts of your life you wish had never happened. We've all tried it. You close your eyes and wish you could go back. Say the thing you should have said. Undo the damage. Call instead of ghost. Stay instead of leave. Maybe you imagine telling your younger self what to avoid, who not to trust. Maybe you dream of stopping that one choice, that one mistake, that one silence that echoed longer than it should have. But even in your daydreams, you know it's not that simple. Because if you erased the pain, would you still be you? If you killed the moment that scarred you, would you also kill the wisdom that came after? If you rewrote your past, would the person doing the rewriting still exist? The grandfather paradox isn't just about time travel. It's about the limits of control. It's the cruel realization that even if you had a time machine, if you had stepped back into the most pivotal moment of your life, changing it might change you so completely that you'd never return to the version of yourself who wanted to go back in the first place. So you ask yourself, do you really want to undo the past, or just stop it from hurting so much? Maybe healing isn't about erasing. Maybe it's about surviving the memory long enough to grow past it. Maybe the ache in your chest is the price of continuity, the proof that you're still here, that you made it through, that the loop didn't win. Because there are pieces of your past that built you, even the ones that nearly broke you, and sometimes you can't separate the construction from the damage. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the past can't be rewritten, but it can be understood. You can't go back and shoot the source of your pain, but you can stop letting it aim the gun at you every morning. So you lower your arm, you step out of the cabin, you walk forward, and behind you in the smoky, fading past your grandfather lives. Your story continues, not perfect, not painless, but real. And maybe that's enough, because in the end, the paradox was never about whether you could kill the past. It was about realizing you don't have to. The liar's paradox. This sentence is false. You're scrolling late at night, half asleep, half awake. Your screen glows softly in the dark, and you land on a page that just says, "This sentence is false." You blink. You read it again. It's simple, plain, almost laughably short, but the longer you stare at it, the more something inside you begins to unravel. If the sentence is telling the truth, it is false. Then it must be true. But if it's true, then it's false. And if it's false, then it's true. You just stepped into a mental trap. A loop, a hallway with no exit. A self-referential sentence that eats its own meaning. It can't be true and it can't be false. It cancels itself out, but still it exists. It sits there, unresolved, smiling like a trickster who knows you're never getting out. And it doesn't just live on pages. It lives in people, in thoughts you try to bury, in contradictions you carry. Like when you say you're fine, but you're not. When you claim you don't care, but your chest tightens every time you see their name. When you tell the world you've moved on, but you still check the time difference just to know what hour they're living in. This sentence is false. Sometimes your words lie and you know it. Sometimes they lie and you don't. Sometimes your truth is tangled in so many layers of performance, you forget what's real. You wear a mask long enough, it starts to feel like skin. And then there's the worst kind of paradox, when both sides of you are right. You want to stay. You want to leave. You love them. You resent them. You believe in yourself. You think you're a fraud. And so you spiral. Not because you're weak, but because logic doesn't work on emotions. The human heart is a liar's paradox. You want to be known, but you're terrified of being seen. You crave connection, and then flinch when it gets too close. You build walls, then get angry that no one breaks through. So what is real? The sentence on the screen mocks you now. It's not just a puzzle, it's a mirror. Because maybe truth isn't a fixed point. Maybe it shifts, depending on where you're standing, what you survived, how much sleep you've had, who you've lost. Maybe some truths are too slippery to pin down. You say, "I'm over it," but your voice cracks. You say, "I don't beat anyone," but you whisper it into an empty room. You say, "I know who I am," but some days you're not so sure. The liar's paradox shows us that language. So often the tool we use to define ourselves can also be the cage that keeps us spinning. It reminds us that not every question has an answer. Not every feeling has a label. Not every contradiction needs to be solved. Some things are just lived through. So maybe it's okay to say two things at once. To be brave and afraid. To be healing and still hurting. To tell the truth with tears and lies and trembling. This sentence is false, and yet it exists, like you. Wounded and wise. Flawed and trying. Real even when you feel like a contradiction. True even when you're not sure what that means. The observer effect. Do you change reality by looking at it? You're standing in front of a closed door. Behind it is something you're afraid to face. A truth, a memory, a version of yourself you've been avoiding. You reach for the handle. Pause. Your breath catches. What's behind the door might not exist yet. Not until you look. It sounds impossible, but this is the strange world we live in. In quantum physics, there's something called the observer effect. It says that tiny particles, electrons, photons, behave one way when left alone and a completely different way when someone watches. Before being observed, a particle exists in a cloud of probabilities. It's not in one place, it's in all possible places at once. But the moment you look, it picks a side. The act of observing collapses possibility into certainty. Reality changes, because you looked at it. And now you're wondering, does this only happen in labs? Or does it happen every time you look in the mirror? You've seen it before. A child performs differently when someone's watching. You act braver when others are near. You carry yourself differently when you're being perceived. Posture, voice, the words you choose. And sometimes you only start to fall apart after someone asks, "Are you okay?" Does observation create the emotion? Or does it reveal what was already there? What if your reality isn't just what happens to you, but what you notice? You wake up in a room, same four walls, same life, but some days it feels like a cage, other days like sanctuary. What changed? Maybe you did. Maybe your attention did. Your perception isn't passive. It molds the moment, like the camera that changes a subject simply by being present, like the quiet anxiety that blooms when someone watches you too closely. You look at a situation and suddenly it shifts. You name a feeling and suddenly it sharpens. You remember a moment differently and suddenly the past rearranges itself. So what's real? Is reality a fixed thing waiting to be discovered? Or is it something we participate in, shaped with every glance, every thought, every choice to see or not see? There's a kind of magic in attention. It can heal or destroy. When you look at a wound, truly look at it, it starts to sting again. But sometimes that's the first step to healing. And when you look away from your joy for too long, it wilts quietly in the dark. Observation is creation. You observe a stranger's kindness and suddenly the day feels lighter. You observe your own failure and suddenly it becomes who you are. You observe the possibility of love and suddenly you start to act like someone worthy of it. And this goes deeper. Some memories don't hurt until you bring them into focus. Some truths don't exist until you're brave enough to stare them in the face. So maybe you haven't been avoiding the pain. Maybe you've been avoiding the observer effect, the moment when looking becomes too real, too irreversible. But the truth waits for you. It doesn't take shape until you give it your attention. The past, the future, even your sense of self, none of it's solid until you decide to turn your gaze toward it. And when you do, something shifts. You don't just see reality. You shape it, one glance at a time. The omnipotence dilemma. Can perfection make a mistake? You've been taught to aim for perfection, to get it right, to be strong, wise, flawless, unshakable. But now in the quiet, when no one's watching, you ask the question you've been afraid to say out loud: what if perfection is a prison? Imagine a being that is completely perfect, knows everything, needs nothing, cannot fail, cannot change. A being like that can't be surprised, can't improve, can't grow. Why would it need to? It's already perfect. But then ask, can it make a mistake? If it can't, then it's limited. If it can, then it wasn't perfect in the first place. And that's the paradox. The omnipotence dilemma asks a simple but shattering question. Can an all-powerful, perfect being do something imperfect? Can it contradict itself? Can it make a mistake and still be what it was before? The moment perfection tries to change, it reveals a flaw. But if it never changes, never learns, never bends, then it becomes frozen, stuck, lifeless, a statue, not a soul. So now the question is, what's more powerful? the ability to stay perfect forever, or the courage to fall, to learn, to become something new. And suddenly, this isn't just about some distant deity. It's about you. Because you've tried to be perfect, haven't you? You've tried to say the right thing, feel the right way, be the right kind of person for the people around you. You've punished yourself when you slipped, when you snapped, when you failed. You believed that to be worthy, to be lovable, you had to be above flaw. But the truth is, perfection can't cry. It can't laugh unexpectedly. It can't wonder what's next. It can't say, I don't know. And isn't not knowing where all the magic begins? Isn't that the moment things start to move? If perfection can't learn, then perfection can't grow. It can't evolve. It can't stretch itself into something wiser, kinder, deeper. It can't stumble across beauty it didn't see before. It can't become more whole while embracing its broken parts. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be changing, becoming, failing forward. You were meant to make mistakes and let them teach you something your pride never could. You were meant to be unfinished, because only unfinished things can still open. So maybe the question isn't, can perfection make a mistake? Maybe it's, what kind of power is worth having? The power to control everything, or the power to forgive yourself when you can't. You might spend your whole life trying to avoid error, but in the end, it's your errors that carve the shape of who you are. They mark the moments you were alive, human, real. Maybe the most divine thing isn't perfection. Maybe it's compassion. Maybe it's growth. Maybe the most powerful being isn't the one who never falls, but the one who falls and chooses to rise again, softer than before. So no, perfection can't make a mistake. But you can. And maybe that's the point. The infinite hotel paradox. Can a full hotel still have room? You arrive late at night, your suitcase dragging behind you, clothes damp from the rain. There's only one hotel on the horizon. Enormous, glowing, endless. A strange kind of quiet hums in the air as you walk through the doors. The front desk clerk smiles politely. Welcome to Hotel Infinity, they say. Every room is full. You sigh. Of course it is. But they continue. We still have room for you. Wait, what? Every room is occupied. Every single one. An infinite number of guests, all checked in. And yet, they're sliding a key across the counter. Room 1,000,001. Or maybe room +1. It doesn't matter. There's always one more. You're confused. You want to protest. You want to understand how something can be completely full and still not be out of space. But that's the paradox. The infinite hotel paradox, imagined by the mathematician David Hilbert, goes like this. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, and every single room is full. A normal hotel would turn you away, but not Hotel Infinity, because here they can simply ask every guest to move from roomin to roomin +1. Every guest shifts over one room, and suddenly, room 1 is empty again. Just like that, you're checked in. And if 1,000 more guests arrive tomorrow, no problem. They'll move each guest to roomin +1,000, and now rooms 1 through 1,000 are open. Infinity plays by different rules, and you begin to wonder. If something can be full and still have space, what does it even mean to be full? And now you stop thinking about hotels and start thinking about yourself. Because you've felt full before, haven't you? Overwhelmed, maxed out, like there's no more room inside you for one more feeling, one more failure, one more breath. You tell yourself you've reached your limit. No vacancy, lights out. And then life comes along and hands you something else, another loss, another responsibility, another change. And somehow you make room. You stretch, you shift, you absorb it. How? You thought you were full, but maybe you weren't. Maybe you're a little like Hotel Infinity, spacious in ways you can't measure, capable of carrying more than you ever expected. Grief, joy, wonder, confusion, all coexisting under the same roof. Maybe your capacity isn't fixed. Maybe it expands quietly with every experience, every heartache, every moment you keep going. But there's another side to the paradox, too. If there's always room for more, does that mean you're never allowed to be done? Never allowed to rest? Does it mean you have to keep taking on more, until you forget what peace felt like? Infinity is seductive. It tells you there's always space, always more to do, more to be, more to prove. But sometimes you have to close the doors. Say, I'm full, even if you could technically keep going. Because not everything infinite is good. Some infinities are exhausting, like thoughts you can't stop thinking, like what-ifs that loop endlessly, like expectations that keep expanding no matter how much you give. So maybe the real lesson isn't that you are infinite. It's that you get to choose when to be. You get to decide when to stretch and when to stop, when to welcome more and when to say, I need to rest. I need a boundary. I need one room just for me. Because even Hotel Infinity keeps a light on at the front desk. Even in a place where space never runs out, someone still has to decide where the guests go. Someone still gets to draw the line. And that someone is you. The bootstrap paradox when the past comes from the future. You're walking through a dusty attic when you find it. A book. No title on the cover, no author name on the spine. You flip through the pages and feel your stomach drop. You know these words, every sentence, every metaphor. You thought them, dreamed them, even jotted some down in your old journals. But you never wrote this book. Not yet. At the back is a date, 10 years from now. A note in the margin, don't forget to give this to me. The handwriting is yours. You blink, breathe, laugh even. And then it hits you. You've just received your own creation from the future. So you keep it, study it. And when the time comes, 10 years later, you hand it off to your younger self in that same attic, completing the loop. The book exists. It always existed. But it was never written, not in the traditional sense. You didn't create it. Your younger self didn't create it. It just showed up. That's the bootstrap paradox. A loop with no beginning, a cause with no source, an object or idea or piece of knowledge that exists only because it's passed from future to past and back again, over and over, no origin, no author, no true first moment, like a match lighting itself, or a song that never needed composing. You might laugh it off as science fiction, but then you remember how memory works. How sometimes a story forms in your mind, and you don't know where it came from. How ideas arrive fully formed, like whispers from a place you haven't yet been. Have you ever wondered where certain parts of yourself came from? A phrase you say but don't remember learning. A fear that doesn't belong to your life. A dream that keeps repeating, though you swear it's not your own. Maybe some of the things you know didn't start with you. Maybe you're just the middle of the loop, and the paradox goes deeper. Because this isn't just about books and time travel. It's about the moments in your life that feel self-created. The grief that made you stronger, which made you brave, which made you act, which made someone else stronger, which circled back to save you when you needed it most. The kindness you gave that returned years later, unrecognizable but familiar. The words you needed to hear that you ended up saying to someone else, before you even knew you needed them. Where did those words begin? Who first wrote the love that saved you? Who lit the torch? Maybe it doesn't matter. Because the bootstrap paradox isn't about proof. It's about presence. Something can exist without having a clear beginning. Something can be real without needing to be original. Maybe your story doesn't need a clean starting point. Maybe it only needs continuation. Maybe you are the loop. Not the first, not the last, just the part that makes the story keep going. So hand yourself the book. Say the words you needed to hear. Become the source, even if you were never the beginning. And if someday someone asks you who wrote the story of your life, you can smile, shrug, and say, I don't know. I just found it one day, and I kept it alive. The paradox of free will. If the universe is determined, do you choose anything? You're standing in front of a vending machine. You're hungry. Tired. You scan the rows, chocolate, chips, trail mix. You hover over button B7, then B3, then back to B7. You pause, think, choose. It feels like you made that decision. But what if you didn't? What if the choice you just made wasn't the choice at all, but the inevitable outcome of every moment that came before it? The way you were raised, the mood you're in, your blood sugar, the commercial you saw last night, the small chemical shift in your brain triggered by a half-forgotten memory of your childhood kitchen. What if your finger pressed that button because it had to? That's the paradox of free will. If the universe operates by cause and effect, if every atom follows a predictable path based on the one before it, then every action you take is just part of a grand chain reaction. And if that's true, did you ever really choose anything? Or are you just a story being read page by page, convinced you're writing it? Science makes it uncomfortable. Neuroscience shows that our brains make decisions before we're consciously aware of them. A scanner can predict which button you'll press before you think you've made up your mind. That tiny gap, the one between thought and action, is filled with mechanisms beyond your control. And yet you feel like you're choosing. You feel it when you break a bad habit, when you stay instead of run, when you forgive instead of retaliate. It feels like a decision, a flex of the will, a tiny rebellion against inevitability. So who's right? The machine, or the moment? You tell yourself, I chose this job. I chose this relationship. I chose this life. But trace it back far enough and you find all the forces that pushed you here. Your parents, your fears, your culture, your brain chemistry that one night you didn't go to sleep on time and saw something that changed you. So, what if you're not the author of your life, but the main character? And if that's true, should you feel trapped or liberated? Because here's the twist, even if everything is determined, even if you are the inevitable result of causes stretching back to the Big Bang, you are still the one living it, feeling it, making meaning out of it. No one else is experiencing your moment right now. No one else is carrying your version of this story. Maybe you don't control the plot, but you're still the one breathing life into the sentences. And maybe free will isn't about choosing what happens, but how you meet it, how you interpret it, how you shape your response, how you carry your past and offer it a different ending. Because even a character inside a book can scream when they realize the pages are turning without their permission. If the character can evolve inside the lines they didn't write. So maybe you didn't choose where this story started. Maybe you didn't choose your name, or your fears, or your first heartbreak. But maybe you still get to choose this. Whether you run, whether you love, whether you look at the road ahead and say, I didn't ask for this, but I'll still walk it. Maybe free will isn't total freedom. Maybe it's the quiet miracle of awareness in the middle of a storm. And maybe, just maybe, that awareness is enough to make you real. The inverted spectrum is your red, my blue. You pick up an apple from the counter. It's red. Bright, unmistakably red. You've always known it as red. You were taught that color as a child, pointed toward it by someone older who smiled and said the word. But now imagine this. What if the red you see, the vivid, familiar red, isn't the red someone else sees at all? What if when they look at that same apple, the color they experience is what you'd call blue, but they still call it red because that's the name they learned for it too. They learned the same word. You both say red, but the internal experience, completely different. That's the inverted spectrum paradox. It's not about color blindness or vision problems. It's about consciousness, subjective experience, the idea that the inner world of perception might be radically different between people, and that we might never know it. Because you can describe wavelengths, you can measure the frequency of light, you can agree that red is around 700 nanometers, but that number doesn't tell you what it feels like to see red. And maybe that's something no one can ever share. You say a sunset is beautiful. Someone else agrees that maybe your sunset feels warm and golden and full of peace, and theirs feels cold and electric and vaguely sad. Maybe the color red makes you feel alert and makes someone else feel safe. Maybe the world looks entirely different behind someone else's eyes, but you'll never know because you've only ever seen through your own. So now the question begins to eat itself. Do we live in the same reality, or just agree on the same words? You call the apple red. They nod. But that doesn't mean your red is their red. It just means you've made peace with the label. And if our most basic experiences can't be compared, how much else is different? What about pain? Is your sharp sting someone else's dull ache? What about joy? What about silence or loneliness or love? What if we use the same language but never feel the same thing? How do we ever truly connect? You start to realize just how much of life is lived alone in the privacy of your own perception. You start to question what it means to be understood. And yet, somehow, we keep trying. We keep describing sunsets. We keep writing poems. We keep looking at the same apple and saying, yeah, I see it too. Maybe that's the beauty of it. Maybe we'll never know what red feels like to someone else. Or we'll still try to paint it, to name it, to share it. Maybe the miracle isn't in matching our colors, but in choosing to believe that someone else sees something when we point. So you hand someone the apple. You smile. And they say, red. And maybe that's enough. The paradox of the trolley problem. Is there such a thing as a moral choice? You're standing next to a track. There's a lever in front of you. A trolley is speeding toward 5 people tied down ahead. They can't move. They don't know what's coming. But you do. If you pull the lever, the trolley diverts onto another track, where one person is tied down, still innocent, still unaware, still real. 5 lives, 1 life, 1 decision, and the lever is in your hand. This is the trolley problem, one of the most famous moral paradoxes in philosophy. It asks the question we all think we're ready to answer, until we actually stand there, until the lever is real, until there's weight behind the abstract. Because the math seems simple. 5 is more than 1. Save more but is less. A logical choice, a clean solution. But humans aren't math, and morality isn't clean. If you pull the lever, you cause a death. You intervene. You make the choice. If you don't pull it, 5 people died, but you didn't do anything. You just let it happen. So which is worse, acting and killing one, or doing nothing and watching 5 die? And here's where it gets worse. What if the one person is your friend, your child, your mother? What if the 5 are strangers who once made terrible mistakes? What if the one is someone you've never met but whose life, unknown to you, would one day change the world? Who decides the value of a life? Who measures it? And when you choose, because you must, what does that make you? A hero? A murderer? A coward hiding behind logic? We like to believe that morality has rules, that if we're good people, we'll know what to do. But this paradox shatters that. It says, there is no purely right choice. Every option leaves you with blood on your hands or guilt in your throat. There is no version of this story where everyone gets to walk away. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the trolley problem isn't really about trains or switches. Maybe it's about the lives we touch every day without realizing it. The way a word lands, the silence can shift someone else's trajectory. The way we prioritize some people and ignore others. The way we pretend we're not involved when our inaction is just as loud as pulling the lever. You've stood at this junction before, haven't you? Not with a train, but with a choice. Do I tell the truth, knowing it'll hurt someone? Do I stay silent to keep the peace, even if that peace is a lie? Do I leave this relationship, this job, this home, knowing someone will be broken in the process? What do I do when every option costs something? And maybe that's why this paradox endures. Not because it has an answer, but because it reminds us that being moral isn't about being right. It's about being willing to face the weight of choice, to carry what follows, to act anyway, knowing that certainty may never come. You stare at the lever, you breathe. You know that whatever you choose, someone doesn't walk away. And maybe that's what being human means. Not having the right answer, but having the courage to ask the question and live with whatever comes next. The problem of the Criterion. How do you know what you know? You sit in silence, eyes closed, holding a single question in your mind like a coin between your fingers. How do I know what I know? You think about everything you believe to be true. The sky is blue. Water is wet. You were born on a certain day in a certain place. You have a name, a history, a body. You trust that memories are memories, that facts are facts, that your thoughts belong to you. But then, where did it all come from? You learned it, sure, but how? From a teacher? A parent? A book? An instinct? And how do you know that source was reliable? This is the problem of the Criterion, one of philosophy's oldest unsolved riddles. To know if something is true, you need a method of verifying it. But to know your method works, you need something already known to test it against. It's a loop, a trap. You need a ladder to climb out of the pit, that the only ladder is already in the pit with you. So what came first, knowledge or the method? It's like trying to define what's good without already knowing what good looks like. Like trying to pick the best flashlight in a pitch-black room, using only flashlights to see. If you trust logic to find truth, how do you prove logic is valid without using logic? If you trust your senses, how do you know they're accurate if they're your only window to the world? You see the sunrise every morning and assume it's real, but so do characters in dreams. You believe your past is true because you remember it. But what if your memory is wrong, or worse, planted? Now you're not just doubting facts, you're doubting the very foundation of belief. You're trying to map a land with no compass, using tools whose origins are unknown. And yet, you keep living. You keep learning, trusting, choosing. Somehow, despite not knowing how you know, you keep building a life on uncertain ground. Maybe that's what makes us human, not certainty, but faith in our frameworks. But the paradox still whispers. Every time you say, I know, it asks, how? It's the reason conspiracy theories can take root. It's why gaslighting breaks people. It's how entire lives can be built on truths that crumble with one question. How do you know they love you? How do you know you're safe? How do you know what you saw is what really happened? You search for some kind of anchor, something to hold on to. But maybe the anchor isn't knowledge, maybe it's humility. Maybe the answer isn't to escape the loop, but to live inside it with grace. To say, I don't know for sure, but here's what I've seen. Here's what I've felt. Here's what, right now, I believe. And maybe that belief will change. Maybe you'll look back and realize what you knew was only half a truth. Maybe it will fall apart, or evolve. But maybe that doesn't mean you were wrong, just unfinished. Because knowledge isn't a destination. It's a process. A path lit by flickers of understanding, paved with doubt, walked in faith. So you sit there, still, holding the question, knowing it may never have a final answer. Maybe that's what real wisdom is. Not knowing everything, but knowing that you never really did. The paradox of fiction. Why do we cry over things we know aren't real? You're sitting in the dark, eyes glued to a screen. The story unfolds. Someone falls in love. Someone loses everything. Someone says goodbye. Your chest tightens. Hair escapes without permission. You know it's just a movie. Just actors. Just lights and dialogue and a soundtrack designed to pull your heartstrings like a puppet. And yet, here you are, weeping for people who never lived, grieving for things that never happened, feeling something real from something fake. That's the paradox. The paradox of fiction asks a question we rarely stop to consider. If we know something isn't real, why do we feel real emotions about it? You've never met the characters. You know the monster isn't under the bed. You know the novel's war never happened. The heartbreak was scripted. The death only took a few takes to film. But the pain, the joy, the fear, they're all yours. It doesn't make sense. You wouldn't sob over a broken lamp on stage. But give the lamp a backstory, a voice, a family, and suddenly your heart aches when it shatters. Maybe fiction bypasses logic. Maybe it speaks directly to the part of you that doesn't care what's real. Maybe the stories you cry over aren't triggering emotions. Maybe they're revealing them. Because you didn't cry just because the character lost someone. You cried because you did. You didn't flinch because the monster was scary. You flinched because you felt that shadow in your own hallway. Fiction is a mirror, and sometimes it reflects parts of you you've spent years trying not to look at. You cry at the story because it gives you permission to feel something you've been carrying all along. You gasp when the villain turns out to be the hero because you've done things you thought you'd never do. You root for redemption arcs because you want to believe yours is still possible. Fiction is fake, but emotion is real, and when the two meet, something breaks open inside you. A crack in the wall. A memory returns. A truth surfaces that you couldn't reach through logic alone. So maybe the paradox isn't strange at all. Maybe it's proof of something deeper, that our minds can distinguish fact from fiction, but our hearts don't care. And maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe it's the most human thing about us, that we're wired to feel for stories, that we're shaped by characters who never breathed, that we mourn for people who never lived because they represent people we did lose, or never found, or used to be. Fiction lets us rehearse grief, practice courage, borrow hope. It makes invisible things visible, makes pain digestible, makes questions safe to ask. So when you cry at the end of a novel, when you whispered no to a screen, even though you know the ending is written, when you fall in love with a face made of pixels and paper and voice, you're not being irrational. You're remembering that stories aren't just lies we tell ourselves. They're truths we couldn't say any other way. And sometimes the characters that never existed are the ones who understand you best. The simulation argument: if advanced civilizations simulate reality, are we inside one? You're staring at your hands, watching the way light spills across your skin, the tiny lines in your palm, the warmth of the air on your face, the gentle hum of something, fridge, fan, maybe time itself. Everything feels real, solid, undeniable. But what if it's not? What if this is all code? Not metaphorically, not a poetic exaggeration, but literally ones and zeros beneath the surface of the world. A simulation so perfectly constructed that you can't tell it's artificial. So seamless that even your doubt has been programmed in. That's the simulation argument, and it doesn't ask if the world is real. It asks, how could you ever prove it is? Philosopher Nick Bostrom laid it out in a way that makes your stomach twist. If it's possible for any civilization, now or in the future, to simulate conscious beings, people who think, feel, suffer, love, then why wouldn't they? And if they do, they wouldn't just create one simulation. They'd create millions, billions, entire galaxies of simulated minds. Digital ancestors copied dreams, artificial lives playing out across endless machines. And if there are billions of simulations, and only one real universe, what are the odds that you're in the real one? Mathematically, very small. So small, in fact, that it becomes easier to believe you are in a simulation than not. You try to brush it off, say, but I feel real. So would a simulation. You say, but I have free will. Only if the program allows it. You say, but this is too complex, too chaotic, too human to be fake. And maybe that's exactly how it was designed. Maybe the flaws, the awkward silences, the unfairness, the coincidences are part of the realism. Maybe the heartbreaks and contradictions are features, not bugs. And maybe that's the most terrifying part. Because if you're inside a simulation, who built it? Are they watching? Do they care? Was this created as an experiment? A game? A punishment? A school? Are you the protagonist or background scenery? And if this world is fake, does that mean your feelings are too? You think about the people you've lost, the love you felt, the nights you cried until your chest ached. Were those just lines of code, emotional algorithms designed to keep you immersed? If it was all fake, why did it still hurt? Why did it still matter? And maybe that's the question that flips the paradox on its head. Because if a simulation is so good that the pain feels real, if the love feels real, if the choices feel like yours, maybe that's what makes it real enough. Maybe reality isn't about what it's made of. Maybe it's about how it moves you. You don't remember your birth. You can't see beyond your own senses. For all you know, your memories were uploaded moments ago. The story of your life began 5 minutes ago and just feels longer. The stars might be pixels. The sky might be a ceiling. Your friends might be scripts. But does that change how you feel when they say your name? Does that erase the laughter, the fear, the hope? You might be in a simulation, or you might not be. But you still get to choose who you are inside it. Still get to shape the world you think you see. Still get to leave behind echoes, footprints in digital sand that someone somewhere might remember. And maybe that's real enough. Maybe you don't need to know whether this is base reality. Maybe it's enough to live like it matters anyway. So maybe reality isn't something we prove. Maybe it's something we feel in the cracks and the questions, in the quiet moments when nothing makes sense, but you keep going anyway. You've wandered through paradoxes tonight. Time slowed, truth bent, identity blurred. But you're still here thinking, breathing, wondering. And maybe that's all the proof you'll ever need. If you enjoyed dissolving your sense of reality with us, you're exactly where you belong. Subscribe for more paradoxes, thought experiments, and late-night truths that make your brain whisper, wait, what if that's true? Because reality might not be real. But the curiosity that brought you here, that's as real as it gets.